Good morning. We've been having scriptures and sermons about tough topics. This is a really tough topic. And this is going to be kind of scary, but I'm going to read what it says. And then I'll let Pastor Debbie do what she wants to with it. Okay. The scripture is Genesis 19, 1 through 17. The two angels came to Sodom in the evening, and Lot was sitting in the gateway of Sodom. When Lot saw them, he rose to meet them and bowed down with his face to the ground. He said, "Please, my lords, turn aside to your servant's house and spend the night and wash your feet. Then you can rise early and go on your way." They said, "No, we will be spending the night in the square." But he urged them strongly, so they turned aside to him and entered his house, and he made them a feast and baked unleavened bread, and they ate. But before they lay down, the men of the city, the men of Sodom, both young and old, all the people to the last man, surrounded the house, and they called to Lot, "Where are the men who came to you tonight? Bring them out to us so that we may know them." Lot went out of the door to the men, shut the door after him, and said, "I beg you, my brothers, do not act so wickedly. Look, I have 2 daughters who have not known a man. Let me bring them out to you, and do to them as you please. Only do nothing to these men, for they have come under the shelter of my roof." But they replied, "Stand back." And they said, "This fellow came here as an alien, and he would play the judge. Now we will deal worse with you than with them." Then they pressed hard against the man, Lot, and came near the door to break it down. But the men inside reached out their hands and brought Lot into the house with them and shut the door. And they struck with blindness the men who were at the door of the house, both small and great, so that they were unable to find the door. Then the men said to Lot, "Have you anyone else here, son-in-laws, sons, daughters, or anyone you have in the city? Bring them out of the place, for we are about to destroy this place, because the outcry against its people has become great before the Lord, and the Lord has sent us to destroy it." So Lot went out and said to his son-in-laws, who were to marry his daughters, "Up, get out of this place, for the Lord is about to destroy the city." But he seemed to his son-in-laws to be jesting. When morning dawned, the angels urged Lot, saying, "Get up, take your wife and your 2 daughters who are here, or else you will be consumed in the punishment of the city." But he lingered, so the men seized him and his wife and his 2 daughters by the hand, the Lord being merciful to him, and they brought him out and left him outside the city. When they had brought them outside, they said, "Flee for your life. Do not look back or stop anywhere in the plain. Flee to the hills, or else you will be consumed." And this is scripture, Genesis 19, 1 through 17.
This story is messy. How many of us thought we knew what it was about? How many of us were surprised by what it's actually about? Some of the particulars, right, are shocking and startling, and some are downright repulsive. Now, many of us hear this passage or the title of the name of these cities, and we hear resonance with what's known as the gay debate or scriptures against homosexuality, right? There's been this linguistic correlation between Sodom and sodomy and gay folks, right? Okay. And with that, generally there's been a prohibition of the same. That's sort of what we've inherited when it comes to this passage, is this sort of commingled, distorted view of what the story is about and where there is a potential prohibition. But you, if you were listening well, probably heard that this story has nothing to do with homosexuality, with committed gay relationships, with love, with choice. It's not about that. It's about mob mentality. It's about violence. It's about rape. And those subjects are very different than the other. Now, part of our work in the Tough Topic series is to look at how a scripture has been taught, how it's been used, and to evaluate the legitimacy of that teaching, and then to find a path forward, both in terms of the particular passage and in terms of the larger topic that it relates to, how we understand the scriptures and how it ties to our faith stories. So one of our initial tasks when we come to this text is to sort of untangle the misinterpretation that we have inherited, which sounds easy enough. You just untangle it, right? But it's sort of like a mess of necklaces or cooked spaghetti that hasn't been rinsed or oiled. You pull on one and what do you get? The whole tangled mess. And sometimes we think, well, I should be able to just sort of string these things up one by the other to make sense of them. And often they say tangled up and tied up, and sometimes they get torn apart. And we can't even see anymore that this part we might be elevating is actually tied to all these other parts that we want nothing to do with. Theological work can be messy work, and this is one of those scriptures that offers us that kind of mess. There are lots of theological layers, many of which we will not even touch today. But we're going to touch a bit. We're going to do what we can, and so we're going to get to work. But before we do that untangling work, I want to sort of offer the premise of where we are starting and entering this conversation as a affirming and queer inclusive church. Wenatchee First United Methodist Church affirms the full personhood of all people. That is one of our assumptions as we come into this dialogue. We affirm that every human is created in the image of God, and there is a likeness of God in who we are called and created to be. We believe that God calls us to relationships, all types of relationships, friends and neighbors and co-workers, collegial relationships, faith community, family, and for some of us, we are called to intimate covenantal partnered relationships. And we believe that our relationships should be healthy, loving, and fruitful. And we believe that all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. We are sinful in our nature. We fall short. We fail one another. But the standard, the ideal, what the goal is for us to have life-affirming, healthy, fruitful relationships. And in particular, when it comes to intimate relationships, we believe that those should be consensual, empowering, supportive, and loving. And that standard applies to gay and straight relationships. That's the bar: consensual, empowering, supportive, and loving. Do we always achieve those things? No. If you were here last week, you know we sometimes fall short, but what we should strive towards is that which is good and honors the fullness and wholeness of each person. So those are some of the basic assumptions, theological understandings that are the framework for how we have today's discussion, which is addressing this text wherein we do not find any loving, life-affirming, mutual, supportive, encouraging relationships. There might be one between Lot and his wife. We don't really get into their nitty-gritty details, but what we find of the townspeople is certainly not life affirming. It is not honoring of the other, the stranger that is in their midst, neither the angels nor Lot. What we find in Lot's relationship to his girls is It is not loving. It is not life-affirming. It is not encouraging. So what we need to sort of tease out is our expectation for relationships in general and what we find in this passage. And when we come with those norms, loving, affirming, life-giving, we find that this passage and the people in it are a mess. And if we tease out the conversations and we see queer relationships, queer being a positive, affirming identity, right? We have to sort of stop there because many of us grew up in a generation where queer was a slur. Anybody? It is not a slur here. It is an inclusive, affirming term. So when we come to those queer relationships that are life-affirming, empowering, and loving, those are not what we find in this text. Are we clear on the distinction, the conversation that we are and are not having? Queer identity has nothing to do with rape or sexual violence, any more than straight relationships have something to do with rape or violence. Do those things happen? Yes, they are part of our sinful nature. Are they part of God's intention for any of us? Absolutely not. So we're distinguishing the conversations. We're sort of separating out where the conversation is. And before we get too far into the text, I want to offer a sidebar, which is this conversation for the Church Universal, and the United Methodist Church in general has been problematic. And that's saying it nicely. Right? We have been arguing about queer inclusion, homosexuality, gay clergy for over 40 years. And so I know that as a denomination, we are mixed in our beliefs. We come from diverse places and assumptions and upbringings. I'll share that I did not come from a place that was queer affirming as a child or as a youth or when I got to college. I had all kinds of stuff to unpack. All kinds of assumptions and all kinds of bias. And in my journey of understanding who people are and created in the image of God, what it means to have a relationship, what it means to be affirming and supportive and loving in your relationships, I have done Bible study and theological study and deconstruction and reconstruction and Bible study and prayer and deconstruction and reconstruction. It has been a process for me, and I continue to learn. And I believe that for us it is a process, and we continue to learn. And I know that some of us have not been offered spaces to have the conversation. So if you want or need to have the conversation with somebody who understands the perspective, with somebody who's done some homework, I am more than happy to do that. I'm happy to sit down, and you can say things that you're afraid to say because you know they don't sound loving or they aren't what you hear this morning or any of those things, and we can unpack them together. Because I don't believe that you just take what I say. I believe that it's a process that we have to tease out all this stuff. So I want you to know that I am here for you for conversation. And I don't need you to believe what I believe this day. But I want you to know that if you are unpacking, if you're trying to discover and understand that there is a place for healthy and holy conversation among us. All right, so to our very messy text and what we are actually dealing with. The first thing to note is that this story of Sodom and Gomorrah does not begin in Genesis chapter 19. It doesn't come out of nowhere. This problem isn't just here with these people in this moment. We actually have to go back to Genesis 12 and 13 to sort of get the beginning of the story, which relates to Abraham and his call, to God's calling to him and where he is supposed to go, and for his family, which includes our title character, Lot. Lot is Abraham's nephew, and Abraham gets to go this way, right? Having generations as many as the grains of sand on the sea, and he gets these lands, and Lot goes this way, and he gets those lands. And from the very beginning, there is a problem noted with Sodom and Gomorrah and their sister cities. They're just a mess. They're known as wicked, they're known as evil, and that's from over here. Before they're even a part of the conversation, there's just this intonation that there's a problem with Sodom and Gomorrah. And so then we have this sort of weaving of story of where Abraham is and where Lot is, and let's be reminded that Sodom and Gomorrah have issues. And then we have more of Abraham's story. We sidebar for the story of Hagar and Ishmael, Abraham's firstborn son. That's a whole other hot mess. And then we sort of plot along a little bit further, Abraham and Lot, until we see a little bit more problem with Sodom. And so much so that in chapter 18, Abraham has this conversation with God, where God is ready to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah, lay them out flat. And Abraham knows that Lot's over there. And actually, Lot got there as a prisoner of war. So he's not there by choice, he's there by force, but he's there. And Abraham says, that's my kin over there. So hey, God, before you destroy them, if there were like 50 good guys over there, would you spare the city? And God says, yeah. And Abraham says, okay, good. So if there were only 40, would you still spare the city? And God says, yeah. And this negotiation goes back and forth. 30, 20, 10. Okay, 10. There's only 10 good people in the city. Is it worth sparing those cities? Not just those people, but those cities. If just 10 are good. And in the dialogue that we have in chapter 18, God says, yes. Yeah. The goodness, the righteousness of a few, that would spare the city. So that's the beginning place of this conversation. Now we get to chapter 19, to this place where we find Lot sitting at the city gate. And there, while he's sitting, two angels, I know you're listening. Two angels approach, and he says, come to my house. Come to my house, and I will feed you, and I will care for you, and I'll wash your feet. I'll do these things. I'll offer you hospitality. So come to my house. And they say, no, we're going to hang out in the city center. Now, the angels came with an agenda. They are God's messengers. They have work to do. You see angels on the floor, you know that God is coming with a message. Now, Lot doesn't necessarily know that, but as an Israelite, angels are people who are messengers of God, and so you offer them goodness and hospitality as if they were God. And so he says, come and hang out at my house. They say, no, we're going to hang in the city center. He says, no, you come to my house, and they say, okay. And so they go to Lot's house, and the people of the city who have had problems over and over again, chapter and chapter again, who are sort of bent in a wicked direction, they get word of these strangers, these foreigners, these outsiders, and so they come after them. And the version that we had today sounds so nice. Send them out so that we can know them. And we have this, like, I don't even know what generation it is, y'all know, but we'd like to get to know you, yes I would, right? Like, it sounds like that, but really, no, it's terrible, it's biblical, no. And in this setting, it's not just like consensual, it's actually forced, which makes it gang rape, which is terrible, right? Lot sees that, he hears that, and he says no, and he's going to protect these messengers of God, and he says, absolutely not. And we would be really grateful if the story stopped there. Yeah. But it doesn't, because Lot's out there like protecting the door, and he says, no, not the angels. They're safe in my house. But here I have two daughters. And all of us should collectively groan and have this bleeped out, what the? Right? Like, who does that? We thought Lot was this faithful man. We thought Lot was a good guy. We thought Lot was the one worth saving, right? The one that Abraham was fighting for. And then in this moment when push comes to shove, like he can see God's messengers, but he can't see the humanity and personhood of his daughters. I mean, It's not okay in any sense for the townspeople to want to attack these strangers, these foreigners. But I think we can understand a little bit the cognitive dissonance that happens between those that we know and those that we don't know, right? Like the them that we don't know, the them that don't have humanity or personhood for us, the ones that we don't have empathy for. We can understand how the townspeople might just sort of get that mob mentality and go after the ones that they don't know. But Lot knows his daughters, not in the biblical sense, but he knows who they are. He's loved them, he's raised them, and he's willing to sort of set them up for this most egregious violation. It's at this point in the scripture that I now have no sympathy for Lot. You can leave him behind. Because that's not what we do for people, right? And you could make some argument about like the value of women in that time and place, and you know what? It's just hogwash. I mean, there's a reality to it, but also it does not make it okay. Not in any way, shape, or form. The story just got messier. It just got worse. And so here we are wrestling with a different kind of conundrum. What do we do with the stories in the scriptures that relate to violence against women? How do we understand Lot as one of God's faithful who made a terrible decision and a terrible offer? What do we do with that? Where do we go with it? And it's one of those theological threads. It could be its own series, sadly and unfortunately, and we're not going to fix it for us. We're not going to solve it today, but we're going to sort of keep pressing on through our text. And one of the things that I want to say is that our text in and of itself has an inherent bias. It is the story of the Israelite people told by, well, men, yeah, but also by the Israelite people, which means that it's shaded by their perspective, by their narrative. So it's easy for the Israelites to sort of look at their story, their people, their suffering, their abuses, any of the things that is happening to them. And the Sodomites and those from Gomorrah and those from the other place all become other. Right? Do you see what I'm saying here? There's a problem where we lack sympathy and empathy and truth and awareness for what was going on in those communities, what was really taking place. We can't sort all that either. It's its own theological mess. But I want us to just know the story of the Israelite people is told by the Israelite people, and it's informed by their context. It's informed by their understanding of themselves, for themselves, in relation to God, but still separate from those other folks. All right, so we have Lot offering up his daughters, and then we have the men coming, the townspeople coming against Lot, and we have the angels protecting Lot, bringing him inside, protecting them from the night, turning the men blind. There's a whole lot of mystery mixed up in there. They were just at the door, and now they can't find it, right? What's actually going on there? But what we see is that Lot is protected. The angels say, you got to get out, because it's not going to be cute. It's not going to be good. So you need to go and, make sure your people are out and safe. And so, that doesn't happen that night, but the next morning the angels really urge them, go. Just get out of here. And so then we come to this part that sort of hits into the cultural isolation that is the Israelite story, because Lot and his family get on the road, and what happens to everybody else? They're wiped out, completely destroyed. Not just Sodom and Gomorrah, but Admah and Zeboim and Zoar, the sister cities. They are all obliterated. And that's where we come to the theological problem of wait, God just obliterated all those people, no regard for them? There really wasn't one good man among them? I mean, we know the story. It wasn't great, but nobody? There was nobody worthy of redemption or saving. That is a problem in and of itself, because if it were us in their place, we would want God to see our goodness somehow, some kind of way, to think that we were not beyond redemption. The story is fraught with challenges, and we don't easily find redemption for it. Some of us are okay with an angry God who smites the terrible people. Right? You might not admit it in church. It's okay. I know how you are. There's those people. There are some people where you think they should get theirs. We have that struggle. It should not be good because they have not been good. They have done horrible, atrocious, god-awful things to countless people, and there should be a punishment for that. Do we not believe in justice? Right. I know it's a trick question. It's all right. But we understand it's messy. People are messy. People are complicated. We are complex. And one of the things that we often see is that there's much more intersection of who we are. How many of you are 100% righteous? John Wesley says you can go on to perfection. How many of you are there? Right? How many of you are some part righteous, some part terrible? Or kind of bad, maybe not terrible. Right? We're mixed, we're complicated, we are messy. And in our story, we believe that redemption is a part of what is offered to us, part of what is available through the person of Jesus Christ. As a denomination, we believe in the power of God's redemption. And that's not just us, right? That's Christianity in general, but a particularity of how that gets expressed as Methodists. We do not believe in the death penalty. Did you know that? As a denomination, we are openly against the death penalty. We do not believe in it. And the reason, the justification is because all of God's people can be redeemed. Everyone is created in the image of God. Everyone has a possibility of redemption. And so we don't want to stop the story before the redemption can happen. So we don't believe in the death penalty because we believe that even those who have done atrocious things, egregious things, who sit on death row, have the possibility of God's redeeming work in their lives. This is part of who we are. It's part of what we believe. And so when we come into a story like Sodom and Gomorrah, where it looks like there's no redemption, where it looks like there's no grace, we should have a problem with it. Because we know that God's story is bigger than our sin. We know that God can intervene even when we have gone to the worst possible place. God shows up. And we know that through the person of Jesus Christ. We know that God is willing to do anything and everything for the sake of our redemption, so that we might be restored in relationship, so that we might walk in righteousness, so that we might know hope, and so that we might know grace. God gives it all. Now, this passage in particular isn't one that we make sense of easily or quickly. It is that spaghetti noodle mess. You're not going to just pull out one strand and be like, oh, this is my theology of theodicy. That's God's work in the world where God steps in and does stuff. Like, what is God's punishment? Where is God's redemption? Who does God favor? Who does God not favor? Those are theological strands, and they're all wound up and messed up together. It's not the passage of easy answers. I wish that there was just a simple moral of the story or teachable moment, some takeaway that I can offer you. The best I have is people are messy, and so is their story. That's true, right? I could say that out of this passage. People are messy, and so is our story. And sometimes when we come into scriptural stories, we're just left with the messy, uncomfortable bits. We want the shiny, happy bit, and this does not have it. If we continue on, right, Lot and his wife, they go and they're walking. We know her story, right? God says, don't look back. The angels say, don't look back. And so what does she do? She looks back and she becomes pillar of salt. You all know that one so well. I love it. First service knew it too, right? It's complicated and it doesn't have good solutions. Like, God punished her just for looking back? How many of you have ever made a big life change and never looked back? No one. Nobody does that. So why is she punished for it? We're not going to make sense of it today. It's all right. It's messy. And there isn't a clear solution, but there is hope and there is redemption, not from this story in and of itself, but because of the God that we know through Jesus Christ. We know that God is bigger than our sin. We know that the power of redemption and salvation stands outside of our inclination to harm, to violence, to otherness. God is greater than those things. And so for the story where there isn't great solution, we're going to turn to the better solution in Holy Communion. We're going to say this one's messy, and people are messy, and it probably isn't what we thought it was, but what it is really terrible, and there's not great answers for that either. But when there's not great answers, when there's not simplicity, there is Christ. And so we turn to him and his sacrifice and what he gave to us as we share in a holy meal, as we look for salvation, for forgiveness, for redemption, for hope, and for healing in the midst of our story. And while I hope and pray that this kind of violence isn't our story, isn't your story, I know that some of us have been touched by it in significant ways. And I know that no matter what has come at you, whatever has happened to you, whatever sin you have been a part of, God's grace is greater through the person of Jesus Christ.